Hello, everyone. I'm Shama. I'm here with Ava. Hi, Ava.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, we're here today to have a conversation about sign note inventories, right? So I'm going to take you through what sign note inventories can look like and what they can do. And I'm just going to show you everything from scratch.
All
Does that
right,
sound
that's great.
okay? I'll share my screen. Ooh. Okay, so you can see my screen is on the inventories tab of SignOut, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So uh, for people that are going to be setting up inventories in SignOut, which is by far like my favorite part of SignOut, so I'd highly recommend it. They're going to be met with an empty page when they go to set up their first inventory. And all they need to do is click the new inventory button. I have an example of it here. So I'm going to go into it. Okay. So when you set up a new inventory, you're going to be met with this empty page, and you have the ability to add a new item or import items in bulk. Say you were working off of an inventory in Excel, maybe you can import it all together, like hundreds of items at once. You can have like search and barcoding functions that comes in when you have more items populated, and the filtering, of course. And then there's this button here, which is the manage columns button, and it'll help you set up your inventory. So all I want to highlight is that I've added one item here using the new item button, and you can see that by default, there's these four columns that everyone will be able to see. Actually, there is a fifth column. You'll also be able to see who it was added by, but that's hidden at the moment. So the assigned column, when this inventory items is being called into different protocols and tasks, it'll be tracked here. Every item in SignNote has a unique ID, and that's automatically generated. Then it has the name that you give it and the date it was added on. And you'll also be able to know that it was added by me. And the name is hyperlinked. So when you click it, the information card opens up on the right side. So that's sort of the most basic structure of the inventory. But that's not really why we're here today. We're here to talk about how much information it can capture in a really effective format. So I'm going to show you an inventory that I created a little while ago. Okay. So this is an inventory that has a bit of everything. Um, so I'll take you through this instead. How does that sound?
It looks great. I'm very curious to see how you set it up.
Okay, perfect. So you can see here that I've got a fairly populated inventory, lots of different columns. And the thing that I want to communicate upfront is that, sign note inventories, you can think of them as like a dynamic spreadsheet. So you have various different column types, and each column type can capture a specific type of information. So what I want to spend a little bit of time doing is going through all the column types, because the way it works is that you just have to set up the framework. So you just have to have a think in your lab, what inventories do you want, right? So you may have an inventory just for your reagents. You may have an inventory for your cell line, maybe your master cell bank, your working cell bank. You may have an inventory for equipment, like to keep track of what equipment you have in the lab. You may even have an inventory for training purposes or documenting reports. So you can put as much information in there as you want. Like it can be very flexible. So this is just your typical lab inventory. And all you need to do is have a think of what information you want to capture, and then have a think of what is the best format to capture that information. And the reason I say that is because you can see at first glance here, I've got emojis going on, I've got stock, I've got like, drop downs, numbers, text, so you have to just have a think of what format you want to capture that information. And once you have that, you just build out this inventory and you can start importing or adding new items to those columns. So the first step in designing this inventory is to create new columns. So I'm going to take you through all the column types SciNote inventories have available. And then I'm going to show you an example of each type, okay?
That's great.
Right. Okay, so the manage columns button lives here. It looks like a little graph, like a little bar graph. And when you click on manage items, this box pops up, okay? So you can see here that you'll see some of your default items like your item ID and your name, but then you'll see that I have all these other items or all these other columns that I've created. And just purely logistically, you can move them around, right? So if you want to move your columns around and have them displayed in a specific way, you can do that. You can also turn on and off different columns by like clicking on this eye icon, just because different people in your lab will probably have different things that they want to visualize. So that's all the little logistic stuff. The way you create a new column is by clicking this add column button, and this box open up. You can give it a name, and you can then select the column type. So this is where things get really interesting, because this is how you can create a dynamic spreadsheet. So you've got the column type text, you've also got a number. So this isn't like, Excel, like it does take it a step farther. You can also attach files in your column. You can have a drop down, a checklist, a status. We have a stock management add-on, so you can include that here. You can also select date and time, and then just a date, right? So these are all the different column types, and you can do so much with this. So we'll go through each type, and we'll give you examples of use cases for each of them, all right? So I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to focus on a specific column type. Okay, so the first type was text, right? So you can see here, each of my items have like a row designated to them. And you can see that, let's just focus on the first item in question. I've got an E. coli strain, and I'm just going to navigate over, and we'll focus on the concentration column. So this column is an example of the type text. And the reason it's text and not numbers is because I wanted both numbers as well as letters in conjunction, right? So that's why it's of the type text. And there are many things you can record with text. Of course, I have a list of them here. So you can record names, you can record concentrations, as you see here. You can record notes. I have a notes column somewhere. Yeah, I've got a notes column at the end, and you can see that any relevant information that I want to communicate with my colleagues can be recorded here. You can also record links. So if you have like links to anything external that you want to add, like vendor links or external links to like your Dropbox, Google, or SharePoint. If you have an internal server that you want to link for larger files, you can do that there. We also have smart annotations in SciNote. So if you wanted to include any smart annotations and tag a person or tag any other SciNote entity, you can do that in the text column type. You can also record things like lot and batch number. I have them as numbers here, but you can have them as text. Any kind of ordering information can also be of the type text.
Hey,
You can
Shama, can you maybe just show me what are these smart annotations?
Sure. In SciNote, we have two smart annotations. So if you have a column of the type text, what you can do is the first one is the @ button. So this just works as any like social media almost. So you can just, invite someone. So Ava here, I can like invite you and like leave a note for you if I wanted. So, I'm just gonna say hi for now. And when I save it, let me navigate back there. You can see that I've left a note for you. And when you're tagged in something, you're going to get a notification about it, and you'll be able to come straight to this one specific location. So that's one smart annotation. And the second one is, I'm going to go back to the same box. I'm going to remove this. The second one is the hashtag. So the hashtag lets you tag any entity in SciNote. So it's not just the inventory items that have their own ID. Every project, experiment, and task have an ID that's associated with them. So say that a specific item, for whatever reason, you wanted it to be linked to a specific project in question, you can navigate to it and save it. And what that does is it creates a hyperlink to that project or that entity. So this can just be your way of, adding further traceability to your inventory if it's needed. So that's how you would use two smart annotations in the text column type.
That's great. Thank you. I can see some uses of that.
Yeah, no, it's very useful, if you want to tag someone, let them know. If you have like equipment and you want someone to book it or whatever, you could let them know. So there's tons of use cases for that. The next column type that I want to touch on is of the type number. So of course you can record numerous things as numbers. Here I've got my batch and lot number as numbers. But you can also record quantities. You can also record like locations. So if you've got like different numbers for your locations, you can do that. So that's just a few examples of the number column type. And the reason I want to like not emphasize on the number column type is because we have so many others that work so much better than just numbers. So the next thing what's the next column you'd like to go to?
Would actually want to know how you got those emojis. Your inventory looks great.
Okay. Yeah, okay, the emojis, they're a good feature of SciNote. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a column type called status, right? And status is pretty much just a drop down, but with an emoji. So you can assign an emoji and then a piece of text as opposed to just having text. So I've got two status columns here. The first one is, I've just called it type to indicate what type of item that particular item is. So I'll edit it and show it to you there. So you can see that I've got my E. coli and you can see that it's a bacterial cell line, but I have so many other options here in this inventory. So I've got chemicals, enzymes, equipment, files, mouse cell lines, plant cell lines, plasmids, right? So, I mean, you can be very creative here. So this is of the type status, and I think it just helps you, you can sort it and it just helps you like identify things more quickly. In this inventory, I have a bit of everything, but you can imagine this being, very effective when you have more siloed inventories as well. And the other way I've chosen to use the status column is to indicate qualitatively if an item is in stock or not. So we have a quantitative way to do this. We have the stock management column that we can touch on, but that's a paid add-on. So not everyone has access to it or has the budget or may, just not need it as much. But knowing if something is in stock or not is a great way to communicate to your lab group. So here I've just picked like the green, red, yellow, and the non-applicable emoji. And I've got a status here. So just to indicate whether something is in stock, in low stock, needs to be reordered, or if it's not applicable. And this is just a qualitative way for you to indicate whether something needs to be reordered. So for instance, if I were to sort by this, oh, sorry, the wrong column. If I were to sort by the stock status column, I'll be able to see what needs to be reordered, and I can get that done straight away. For things like equipment, it's not applicable, which is why I have that in there. And yeah, that's two examples of how you can use the status column, but there is tons more. So, you've seen the two here. And then you can also use the status column to indicate if equipment is available. So say people are booking equipment and whatnot, you can use the status column to see if something is available or not. Any kind of hazard. So if you have chemicals that have specific hazards to them, you can use an emoji to indicate the hazard of that product. You can also assign you can assign different people. So you can select the people emojis for different people in your lab and assign different people to different items if they're responsible for it. If you're conducting any kind of training and you're tracking your training progress using an inventory, you can indicate your training status using the status column. Freezer temperatures can be used in this way. If you've got different study phases for your items, specimen types, and even location can be used as a status. It just depends on what's suitable in your specific lab.
That's great, thank you. And I was wondering, what's the best column type for tracking who in the lab is assigned to a specific research or project, or I don't know, to a specific training course.
Yeah, so if, well, the status column is one type, but if that is unsuitable, say more than one person is assigned to something, or you want to record that more than one items need to be ticked off of a checklist, the way to do that is to use a checklist column. So you can see here, I've got assigned person as a column type, and they're specific to my equipment. So there's different people in the lab that are responsible for different pieces of equipment. Maybe they're responsible for, calling the technician when the service is due, things like that. So you can see that I've got, it says two selected, so I can see my two colleagues that are responsible for this work. And then there's one where it's just one person. So I'll show you what that looks like. If I were to edit it, you'll be able to see the checklist. So you can see here that there is a checklist, and you can click more than one, more than one person off the list, right? So that's one way you can indicate that one or more people are responsible for something. But the type checklist also has, many other use cases. So assigned persons is one that we covered. If you want to select like different specimen, you can do that. If, you're doing training and multiple people are responsible for something, or there's multiple training processes, they can be ticked off. Just general project management, that's another one. Another just logistical reason is, say you're booking rooms or booking equipment and you need to book more than one at a time, you can use a checklist for that. And any kind of like request management can also be done using a checklist. So that's one. Something similar to a checklist is just your plain drop-down menu, right? So say you don't necessarily need emojis, you just want to check one thing off a list that's just of the type drop-down. So you can see here an example of that is my location column, right? So I'll just show you what that looks like. So I personally couldn't really think of emojis for each and every one of these. So it's just a plain drop down, unfortunately. But you can see here that in the lab, I've got all these different areas as their own, as their own entity, as their own entry. So this is of the type location. So yeah,
Great.
so that's of the type drop down. And again, if there's something that you want to record and only one person is going to be responsible for it, you could have it as a drop down. If you want to indicate instrument availability, there's only going to be one setting for that, so you could use a drop down for that. You could also use it to indicate like companies or manufacturers of different products. different specimen types, again, employees, like if you're using it for training purposes, and like room numbers, anything that needs like a booking or, it's a very binary thing, you could use it for something like that.
That's great. Thank you. And I just remembered that you earlier mentioned a file type column.
Yeah.
So how can we use that?
So yeah, the file tab column is great. Like you can record so much information there. So let me just find my file type. Okay, you can see here that I've got a column for files, and it says that I can record pretty much anything here, like safety data sheets, calibration reports, and so on. I know it looks kind of empty at the moment, but I do have a few files. So not everything is going to need a file firstly, but the option is there to attach whatever you think is relevant. So you can see here, I've got my hydrochloric acid and I've got a safety data sheet, and it's a PDF. I've simply chosen to attach it from my computer. And when I click on it, the safety data sheet opens up, and it's just giving you quick access to some relevant information. I have my equipment down here, and you can see operating manuals attached as well. But there's tons of different things you can attach. So safety data sheets and like just general safety information, spill information, those are like sort of the obvious ones. But then you can also attach calibration reports. You can attach training reports, any kind of Microsoft Office files that you're tracking. Lab reports can be attached. Even reports generated within SciNote, you can add to an inventory. And as I said, any kind of spill or cleanup information, this is just very practical, because if you're working with hazardous chemicals and there's a spill, you need to know what to do, and it's different for every different chemical. So that's just a handy way to record this information. Any kind of instructions for use can be recorded here. User manuals, certificates of analysis. If you have like an instrument availability calendar and you want to be able to see like an entire week or an entire month, you can have a file that does that. And if you have Office web, an Office file can be opened up from here on your browser. Item locations, pictures, notes, results, vendor files, basically any type of file. So it just depends on the use case. And I'll just take this opportunity to mention that, for the sake of this demonstration, I only have like one column of type file and one column for, different examples, but you can have as many columns as you like. So if you want to have 10 different columns of the file type, you can do that, right? So it's not restrictive in any kind of way.
That's interesting. And I have an additional question, which is probably a bit different from the ones I've been asking until now. So we work with aliquots. So I would like to know what's the best way to, manage aliquots with SciNote.
Okay, that's a good question. I have a few examples here. So, in the past, we had people like maybe manually tracking aliquots, and maybe they would have had like a number of aliquots column where they would indicate how many aliquots they had made of each item and so on. But we recently have released a new add-on. It's called Item Relationships. So if you see this column here, that's pretty much what it looks like. When you go to manage columns, it will be in the turned off position. You just need to turn it on. And when you do, you get this column with a number/number next to it, and it's hyperlinked. So I'll tell you what that means. So this is Item Relationships is an add-on that lets you connect different inventory items together within the same inventory and also between different inventories. So the reason for that is, one is that you can track your aliquots. So if you see here, for instance, I'll go back to my E. coli strain. I've got the master stock, and then right below it, I've got 4 different entries for 4 different smaller, like aliquots. And if you notice what it says here, it says 0/4 for the master stock, and it says 1/0 for each of the aliquots. So I'm just going to click on it and show you what it means. When I click on it, this item card opens up on the right, and I'm going to navigate to the relationship section. So you can see here that this particular E. coli strain does not have any parents. So that's what the 0 is for. However, it's got 4 children connected to it. So it just indicates that these 4 aliquots came from this one master stock, right? So it's just a way to track and connect different items together. So if you've made a bunch of aliquots from a reagent, this is one way to track it. And, there may be instances where, you're just removing one aliquot at a time and using it. And that way you can record that information here as opposed to it being connected to the bigger master stock all the time. Or if you made a bunch of aliquots and each person puts their aliquot in their freezer box, like say for antibiotics or whatever, they're then responsible for their own aliquot and they have their own inventory item there. So that's one way to use this relationships feature. Another way is, let me find it. Another way is, okay, you can see here that I've got an entry for Tris HCl buffer, and you can see that it says 2/4 on it. I'm going to click on it, and basically that just shows that this Tris buffer has 2 parents, Tris base and hydrochloric acid. So you know that those specific items were used to make this Tris HCl buffer. And then I've created 4 aliquots of that buffer and they're recorded here. Now, the reason this is important and it's really good for traceability and, reproducibility of information is because items in Cynote can have the same name, but they always will have a unique ID. So say that, this hydrochloric acid has, I entered it today, but then I had to reorder hydrochloric acid in a month's time. I can then create a new entry, call it hydrochloric acid again, but it'll be differentiated in Cynote because they have different IDs. So when this Tris HCl buffer was made, you'll be able to see which specific hydrochloric acid and which specific Tris base was used to do that. Now, if you went on to use these aliquots for specific reasons, say you made a master mix or something like that, then you can link that specific aliquot as the parent of that mixture. So it just helps for tracking that type of lineage. So that's another use case. And then another way you can track it, I'll actually go back. I have a different inventory for this. So if you see here, I've got a master cell bank and a working cell bank. They have very few items in them, but that's just because I'm building it out. So if I click in my master cell bank, you'll see that I've got 3 different cell lines here, and I've captured all the relevant information of the source, the number of aliquots that I have, the passage number, the storage information, characterization, and documentation information. But in the relationships column, you'll see that each one of these items have no parents, but 1 children. And when I click on this, it'll show you the child that is linked to this master cell bank item. And when I click on it, I'll be able to see all the information about it. And you'll see that this actually comes from a different inventory. It comes from the working cell bank inventory. So I've connected items between 2 inventories together. So those are a few use cases, but in any event that you want to link one item to another, you can use the relationships column. So that's how that works.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And I have a couple of last questions for you. So I know that you use the status column for, a quantitative overview of, qualitative overview of what you have in stock. But I also noticed that you are using another stock column. And then you have some, reminders, icons, I would call them. So I would like to know
Oh,
more
yeah.
about it.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, so what I showed you before is a qualitative way to record stock, right? So that at a glance, someone can see, okay, this item is in stock, I don't need to reorder it, it's not running low, and so on. And you can, because we have, columns of number types and text types, you can manually choose to record how much of that item is there. And you have to then manually, go in and adjust it. And that's one way to record stock. But we have a column dedicated to stock management. So that's what this looks like here. And you can see here that I've recorded the stock, the quantity of all of these different items. So I'm just going to click into it. So you can see here that my isopropanol, I have 4 liters of it. Okay, so it's set to 4 liters. You can see that the current stock is 4 liters. So when I go to use it, I can choose to remove. If I add to this, I can choose to add. And so let's say I remove, and I remove 3 liters of this stock. It'll tell you, okay, you had 4 liters. Now you have 1 liter left. If you wanted to create a reminder for yourself, you can create a low stock reminder. And let's just say that I want to be reminded when my stock is at 2 liters, right? And I can leave a comment, can say order now, and I can save stock. So one is that this consumption is being recorded in the back end, okay? And if this item is called in different tasks, you'll be able to know how you were using it, right? But you can see here, I set a low stock reminder for 2 liters and it's under that threshold. So this little symbol comes up, and this is your indication. This is your active reminder that you have a few things that need to be ordered. And that's just the symbol for it. You can see that when something is completely empty, it's red. And it's just a great way to like create a little shopping list, and you'll see that I also have like, different units. Like, for instance, my DNA kit, I only have 2 boxes of it. My buffer, I've got 9 bottles. So whatever unit you're working off of, you can choose to record that here. And that's how the stock management.
Okay, so and how can I keep track of important dates such as calibrations or else?
Okay, yeah. So dates are very important to keep track of, and they can be quite challenging as well. You can do that within the inventory. So when you go to manage columns and add column, you can add a column of the type date and time or date. So I'll just show you how to set it up. So I'll just create a test column and I'll just go with date and time. They're quite similar. But here you're given the option to either set up a reminder, or you can set up a range. So in the reminder, you can choose to remind yourself of something a certain amount of days before a set date, or weeks or months. And you can enter a message as well, right? So say that you were due to call the engineer for, just servicing a piece of equipment, you can adjust that accordingly. Or say you need to reorder something, or, some kind of certification is due. All of those things you can choose to have a reminder for. You can alternatively also choose to have a range. So an example of a range would be like, say that you want to keep track of the duration of time that something is in calibration, or a duration of time when something is, is in good condition and has not expired. So it just depends on what the use case is. And you can set up your date and time column accordingly. So a few different examples are like expiration dates, calibration dates, reorder dates, sample receipt, sample processing, sample due dates, retraining reminders, project due dates. If you've got engineer visits, appointments, training sessions, health and safety meetings, all those types of things have dates and times and ranges associated with them. For me, I just have an example here of like the calibration date. So for my equipment, you can see that, you can see when these items were last calibrated. So that's an example of how you would use the date and time column.
Thank you, Shama. This was a great discussion. And I really have one final question because you showed me how you can set reminders for the stock and also for these important dates, but I didn't quite get how do I get those reminders?
Okay, so well, firstly, you can sort by items that have active reminders here. And you'll see here that there is like a notification bell as well to tell you about it. And that's only if you're in the inventory. But let's just say that, something was low in stock and it needed to be reordered. So all you need to do is navigate to your preferences and navigate down to the notification center. So there's a whole host of notifications you can get in app or in an email. Related to inventories, you can choose to get a low stock reminder within the app or as an email, and even a date reminder within the app or as an email. So for people that are responsible for, say, reordering or restocking, or they're just managing the lab in general, it may help for them to get like an email reminder. Whereas for day-to-day users or people that are logging into SignNote and actively using it from the bench, it may be sufficient to just get an in-app reminder. So that's how that would work.
That's great. Thank you for today.
No problem.